Let's say that you want to get a job using Houdini. You need to go and find a job, first of all, so you need to understand what sort of terms to look for that require Houdini skills. You need to find studios, and you need to put together a demo reel that's specific to the sort of job that you'll be applying for. One reason why people don't succeed in this is because they're not strategic. They're not looking ahead at the job they want and reverse engineering the ingredients it takes to make that demo reel and get there. So in this video, I want to give you a broad overview of the different specialties that you can find yourself in with using Houdini. And at the very end, I also gathered a list of just some of the studios that are currently using Houdini in production. So as you're going out and trying to find these jobs, the different position titles are going to be whatever the studio wants them to be. And so there's actually not a lot of consistency to the various job titles out there, even though they often cover the same things. So what I've done is I've categorized all these different titles into a general sort of position. So in this case, this is the generalist position category, and these are the specific job terms to keep an eye out for when you're trying to find a job at a studio that might also be using Houdini. Fun fact, I would consider myself to be a generalist because I don't just do one thing. I cover a very wide variety of topics, and that's really the main quality that's required from any kind of generalist position. Now with that, I have the CG supervisor, head of effects, head of CG, and freelancer. And the reason why I've included those categories is because once you start getting to the higher levels of the hierarchy of the studio, you'll need to have some degree of awareness amongst other departments that are not your own. For instance, if I was to be the lead of a shading department, I would need to know how the lighting department works in general in order to innovate workflows, tools, tasks that work nicely with what they're doing. And the smaller the studio gets, the more of a generalist you need to become because there may not be a lighting department. You might just have one look dev department that covers shading, modeling, and lighting. Everyone's kind of different with how they organize their studios, but generally speaking, the generalist covers a wide variety of topics. If you decide to go the generalist route, you'll need to both develop your artistic skills and your technical skills equally. You can't really lean one way or the other. You have to be both the artist and the engineer at the same time in order to really pull this off. And with Houdini, it really will assist you greatly depending on what you are doing. As a freelancer, it offers you a great way of coming up with pre-made setups that can be used when a client hires you. So that's really awesome if you can predict the sort of tasks that you're going to run into. And likewise, if you're a CG supervisor, head of effects, head of CG, Houdini is a fantastic platform for automating workflows, for giving artists tools to use. And it makes it more dummy proof because you're not hard coding everything with Python and C++ all the time. If you're just drawing down nodes or you're dropping down nodes, making HDAs, using Houdini engine to transfer data or give those tools to artists, then it allows you to make tools more quickly, and also it allows you to make tools that are more sophisticated than what you would typically pull off if you just did C++ or Python alone. The other benefit to freelancers, while we're on that topic, is the fact that it allows you to not rely on all the various different black box solutions out there, and instead it gives you a system for making your own custom solutions either ahead of time or on the fly. And so the fact that you don't have to learn this plugin over here in Cinema and that plugin in Maya, and you're not jumping around all the different black box solutions to things, is nice. It's all in one place and makes your job more consistent and makes your services more reliable. And for that reason, I think that Houdini freelancers have a big edge over people that need to hop around different platforms and different pipelines all the time. The generalist position is going to be great for people that are your go-getters. In order to be a good generalist, you need to be constantly curious about things. You need to be studying new topics because you find it interesting and enjoyable. You need to be looking beyond your comfort zone. My personal comfort zone is in look dev, but that's not all I do. I'm also doing things in effects. I'm also doing things with Vex and trying to script a little bit. I'm doing things that are outside the norm of just one thing. And so you really have to have that mentality, that curiosity about everything in order to become a great generalist one day. Successful freelancers have the ability to take on just about any gig that comes their way. One week they might be doing some shading, the next week they might be doing some tool building for rigs. So it really just depends on what's out there, the opportunities that are on the table. And again, especially at first, freelancers need to have more work that they can take on based on their generalist skill sets. And my biggest argument for supervisors is that they need to be both artistically and technically competent in order to get along with the devs and the other people that are more technical, as well as keep in mind the artistic quality of what they're doing. So that's why I say, generally speaking, if you ever want to be a supervisor or a head of a department, you need to empathize with all the different aspects of CG, at least to a certain degree, and that in itself makes you somewhat of a generalist. Next up, we have simulation-oriented positions. This is like your bread and butter Houdini job, okay? These simulation-oriented positions use Houdini as the industry standard for creating a wide variety of effects. In my opinion, this is the most purely Houdini sort of position that you can have. Now, understanding Houdini is often the most important consideration for these roles, and simulation-oriented positions tend to rely on more the technical skill sets than the artistic ones. However, you also need to keep a good eye. You need to have good judgments as you're working on these simulations. But if you're somebody who wants to lean more technically in your day-to-day thinking, in your day-to-day tasks, then a simulation-oriented position might be good for you. The only exception I would say on this list to what I just said would be if you are a groom artist. Groom artists think more artistically. It's more about the shading. It's more about layering different sorts of furs. But also, you have to watch out for things like feathers, scales, that could also come onto your plate as a groom artist. Other packages and softwares are going to have simulation things or plugins that you can use, but by and large, Houdini is the king when it comes to simulation effects in the industry. The other thing I'll say about it is that jobs are sometimes split between CFX and VFX. CFX is character effects, so that's your grooms, but that's also things like muscles, potentially rigging, depending on the studio that you're at. And it's also things like cloth simulation, hair simulation, and anything, again, related to a character. Whereas VFX is going to be your standard water, fire, magic kind of stuff. Next up, we have asset-oriented positions. So this is environment artists, layout artists, modelers, asset artists, and look development artists. Again, the tasks and responsibilities are going to be the same to some extent with these different job titles. But as you're looking for jobs in assets, these are the terms to keep in mind. I would argue that asset-oriented positions take more importance with artistic skills than technical ones. You obviously need to have technical skills to expand your opportunities in creating these assets, but I think that a good eye is more important than having a crazy coding background or something of that nature. You want to make sure that things look good, and you want to make sure that you work fast as you're making these things. That means that your journey is going to be closer to a painter's journey or a sculptor's journey than it is to an engineer's journey. And that's because of the fact that it all comes down to practice, repetition, and keeping in mind the underlying principles of good design and artistic quality. Houdini is often complementary to other software packages when you are an asset-oriented artist. And so as an example, you should probably know how to use Unreal. You should probably know how to use Substance Painter, Model Somewhere besides Houdini when it comes to hard surface stuff. But when it comes to anything that needs to be procedural, when it comes to the tedious tasks that take a lot of your time, that's where Houdini can really shine and optimize your workflow to save you potentially days or weeks of time so that you're not wasting hours trying to make a model clean from TurboSquid. Also, when it comes to texturing and shading, you can create custom signals that then get baked out into maps. You can transfer UVs. There's a lot of these technical tasks that are way easier to figure out in Houdini than it may be with other applications. And so for things like that, Houdini is going to be awesome. Also, one of the biggest benefits for asset-oriented jobs is going to be the fact that Houdini authors USD through Solaris. Now, as an individual artist, many people are coming from Blender or Maya or 3ds Max, whatever it is, and you're pretty much groomed to be an asset artist at first, right? You don't recognize the importance of USD until you're working in a team setting. In team settings, USD is very, very important, and that's why it's universally adopted for the most part by most major studios. Or they have something similar to USD that optimizes their pipeline. Now, in order to make things friendly for USD, you need to create variants. You need to create different LODs as a model goes back away from the camera. You need to instance things properly. These are the sorts of tasks that can become a big problem really fast unless you're thinking about managing USD properly and working nicely in a pipeline. So if you are an asset artist and you've never worked at a studio, something that you need to take very seriously is studying USD and figuring out how to work nicely within a pipeline that requires it. And Houdini is going to provide you an easier path to doing just that. Next up, we have technical positions. So I would argue that there's very little artistic requirements for these specific positions. That's going to be your pipeline dev, head of pipeline, developer, tools TD, pipeline TD. These are all the terms you want to search for. And the idea here is that you're going to be combining your coding experience with C++ or Python with Houdini. And so if that's you, then I would say Houdini is going to provide a wide range of technical benefits, and you really ought to check out PDG, Vex, Houdini Engine, and Solaris. Those specific topics are going to offer you the most when it comes to using Houdini in a pipeline or as a developer to make certain tasks easier for you. I also didn't put it on this list, but if you are a researcher, that would also be under the technical positions. And the nice thing about Houdini is that you don't have to write your own fluid solver from scratch every single time. You can run tests. You can implement your code directly as a node or as a Python script. It's very easy for folks in technical roles to use Houdini because of the fact that it's set up in such an object-oriented manner, and it's very cleanly laid out from one node to the next. And then lastly, we have the end of pipeline positions. And so depending on whether or not you're in video games or film, this will change. But end of pipeline typically includes your compositors, lighting artists, render wranglers, and lighting TDs. So with end of pipeline, generally speaking, Houdini is not the only tool that you're going to use, but it's very complementary to certain tasks. So for lighting artists, Solaris USD can offer many advantages because of the fact that you are set dressing and instancing. And if your pipeline is set dressed in USD with Solaris, then it makes it a lot easier for you to set up lights and run tests. And also the Houdini experience is a requirement that's listed on there just so that you have familiarity with the application in general, so that if you need to go in Houdini, render something or poke around to get what you need from an AOV, stuff like that, you know where to go. So as you're looking for compositing positions, that's why Houdini is oftentimes mentioned. It's more about just having a general familiarity with it than it is being a master at simulations and, asset-oriented tasks and stuff like that. And then last but not least, anyone who hits the render button, so that's your render wranglers, your lighters, your compositors, you'll enjoy many features found in ROPS or TOPS, which is PDG. So that's also a couple of topics that might interest you if you're end of pipeline. So there you have it. That's what the landscape looks like as you're searching for jobs. And hopefully that gives you a better sense of the opportunities that are out there and maybe how you want to set up your goals to get to those specific jobs. And take a look at just some of the companies that are currently hiring positions that use Houdini. This is not a full list. These are just some of the studios that you might want to keep in mind. There is an incredible amount of opportunity for folks who have Houdini in their resume. So you will not be lacking in opportunities if you decide to go this route. Thanks for watching. I hope this was useful and have a great day.